So here's a really good question for you. If you're in the police recruitment process, actually, if you're a serving police officer and you are going for a specialist position or you are going for a promotion, should I introduce emotions into my answers or should I curb them? Now, this is a question asked by one of my clients today, and I think it's a really good question, which I'm going to explore in this video and in this podcast for you this evening. So, for those of you who haven't listened to one of my podcasts or watched one of these videos on YouTube before, I'm Brendan from Bluelight, and over the past 28 years, I've been helping people to succeed in promotion boards, specialist interviews, and over the past 12 years, all of that and in the recruitment process to join the police, I've helped over 15,000 people join the police and several hundred people succeed in promotion boards and in specialist interviews. So I'd like to think over that time I've developed knowledge and understanding of what works for you. So in answer to that question, it was asked by one of my clients today when we're doing some one-to-one coaching. And by the way, if you want to find out a little bit more about my webinars, the group webinars, the one-to-one coaching, then click the links below, come and join the online courses. I actually guarantee that you'll pass the police recruitment process if you follow my guidance, follow my advice, do all the hard work, because the process is so formulaic in many ways that can help guide you through every stage of that process. And it gets a little bit harder when it gets to promotion boards. I can't quite give you that guarantee yet. Anyway, back to the question. Should I introduce emotions? Well, in my opinion, yes, you should. Why? Because being a police officer is not a role where it's devoid of any kind of emotional connect. You know, in your answer, when you're describing a difficult situation or challenge that you had to deal with, you know, if you talk about the impact that this problem, this task, this difficult challenge that you had ahead of you had on yourself, well, I think it's okay to say how it was upsetting or you got quite frustrated by something, because then you can talk about how you handle your emotions. You can also talk about how other people got angry or upset or frustrated or whatever the emotion might be, and how you related to that and how you enabled them to work through those emotions so that they took an approach which was a little bit more logical or thought out as opposed to acting on their feelings. So you can bring it in the situation part of your answer. Equally, when you're talking about the actions, and you know from my previous webinars, I like to stress that in our action phase, this is the bulk of our answer. We're not just going to talk about what we did, but we're going to talk about how we did those things. And there's some really specific ways you can talk about how you did certain things to demonstrate the behaviors that they're looking for so they can mark you really highly, because that's what we're after, isn't it? So within there as well, I think there's opportunities to introduce emotions, to introduce how you handled them, and introduce how you handled other people's emotions as well. Why? Because I'll go back to this point that policing is something which is going to have an emotional connect with you, and you need to have some form of emotional response to others because they are going to be in a highly emotional state. You know, most of what you deal with, you're dealing with people who are in a highly emotional state. They're a victim of crime, highly emotional state. If they're being arrested, highly emotional state. You know, people don't approach being, well, a few people do actually approach being arrested in a blasé way, but most people don't. For most people, it's quite an upsetting process that, you know, they don't wake up in the morning and think, do you know, I could really do with being arrested today and having my freedom taken away from me. So they might be angry, frustrated, confused. You're going to have to manage those emotions, and you're going to have to keep your emotions in check. Why else is it important? Well, one of the things I talk about a lot on my practice webinars and my one-to-ones, especially for potential recruits, is how you should be treating people when you arrest them, or treating people who are victims of crime or witnesses, or in your daily contact with people about things that might not be crimes. People who are missing from home, their parents, highly vulnerable people who need your support. You know, we're going to have to be tuned into our emotions and how we deal with them and how we deal with their emotions as well. And if you can demonstrate that in your interview, then you're almost the perfect package, because if we are demonstrating how we can manage our behaviors in certain situations, like difficult situations, difficult decisions, challenging inappropriate behaviour, working with others, taking responsibility for a problem, you know, all of those sort of CVF type questions that you're going to get asked. If we can put the icing on the cake and talk about how we handled emotions, both ours and others, then it really is the icing on the cake. And why is it important? Well, let's just go back to when we arrest someone for an offence. You know, for those of you who are serving officers, actually, and my guess is, I mean, let me know in the comments, and be honest here, did you actually know these things? I'm going to talk to you about Code G of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act. For those of you who aren't police officers yet, Police and Criminal Evidence Act tells you how you must treat people when you arrest them or when you stop and search them. And there's other things in there as well, but in the main it's about how you must treat people when you arrest them or stop and search them. And there's 4 things in the first paragraph of Code G which talks about exactly that, how you should treat people. And in that first paragraph it talks about when you arrest someone, you should treat them in 4 ways. Now go and test yourself if you're a police officer, press pause now and write those things down in the comments. Go on, write them down, or can you not remember them? Or for some of you, honesty time, you might be thinking, there's 4 things? Yes, there's 4 things. When you arrest someone for an offence, Code G of the Police and Criminal Evidence Act, that was amended in 2012, which is interesting because this is an act of Parliament, a code of practice under an act of Parliament that was brought into statute in 1985. 1984 even, 1984. It went live in 1986. I know this because I was there. I was the very first PACE intake at the training school, and when it went live, I was there on the first day. I remember it at the very beginning of January in 1986. Anyway, I go off at tangent. Let's bring myself back from that tangent. So there's 4 things. This was an amendment in 2012, which is subject of another video completely as to why it was introduced. But the Code G tells you as a police officer that when you arrest someone for an offence, you must treat people. You are required to treat people by law, actually, with respect, responsibly, fairly, and without unlawful discrimination. So 4 things: with respect, responsibly, fairly, and without unlawful discrimination. You all knew that, didn't you? Yeah, you're all nodding away going, yeah, of course I knew that, Brendan. Really? Anyway, there's 2 things that I think we can add to that, which are going to really make a difference. And this is something you can think about as a promotion candidate, with things like forward-facing questions, like how in the future you're going to create a culture of fairness, or how in the future you're going to ensure you get the very best from your officers in terms of an ethical culture, or anything to do with culture. We can start looking at how we can embed more than just the legislation. And this is something I go into in great lengths in our promotion webinars, which are every week. Every week we have a promotion webinar. Every week we have a final interview webinar. Twice a week we have an online assessment centre practice webinar. So that's like 4 evenings of my life every week taken up with webinars. I wouldn't do it if I didn't enjoy it. So, but for the promotion boards, we go into extreme fine detail of how you're going to introduce that sort of culture. But the 2 things I'm talking about is when we deal with this person who's brought into custody, we offer those 4 things, and we also offer them kindness and compassion. Kindness and compassion. Why? Well, because it's just the right thing to do. And I've learned throughout my career that it actually pays dividends. It pays huge dividends in terms of how that person behaves whilst they're in custody, how they react to you, how you might be able to just find out something about their life where you can actually put an intervention in place from a partner organisation or point them towards that intervention that's going to be able to help them with whatever the problem is that's causing their life to be so chaotic and full of crime. And it gives us incredible opportunities to build up this relationship with the people who are actually at the sharp end of crime. We can only build up a relationship at the speed of trust. And that trust has enabled me to take a loaded firearm off the street from someone who wouldn't have given us the time of day. 2 years later, flagging me down to tell me where I will find a loaded firearm. And we found it. And we found about £10,000 worth of cocaine to go with it, and about £10,000 in cash. So it was quite the haul, it was quite the arrest. That's another story completely. But it all came from building up that trust with people, offering them acts of kindness, being compassionate towards them, caring for them. I'll end this with a phrase that my first sergeant taught me, good old Don Blackhurst, bless his soul. In 1986, he was my first operational sergeant. Back then, he had 29 years servicing. So he joined in the 1950s. Wow, that's incredible, isn't it? He joined in the 1950s, and he was my supervisor. I've got a lot of time for him. He's an incredible guy. But he taught me, one of the things he said to me is, young Brendan, because I was young back then, and that's what he used to call me, young Brendan, just remember, when you arrest someone, treat them like a lord. And when you bring them into the charge office, that's what they called it back then, not the custody office, when you bring them into the charge office, treat them like a king. And for all the reasons I've just explained, pays dividends. And the thing is, it doesn't cost anything, does it? So, going back to the original question, should we curb our emotions? I don't think we should. I think we should demonstrate how we can deal with our emotions. And I think as a promotion candidate, you should be able to demonstrate how you can handle your emotions as a supervisor and handle other people's emotions, because it is a very highly emotional, and people can get really wired. Their emotions can get really, really wired. And I've seen all sorts of flare-ups inside police stations over the years. I've had all sorts of flare-ups and emotional flare-ups inside police stations and falling outs, and we've really got to be able to manage our emotions. And that's really important. And as a supervisor, how are you going to enable other people to handle their emotions and still reach out with their emotional side to others who might need it? All right, a lot of ground covered there, hey? A lot of ground covered there. If you're still watching this, it means that or listening to this on the podcast, it means you're really, really interested in either joining the police or getting promoted or succeeding in a specialist interview. Then, my invitation to you is to check the links and press that subscribe button, by the way. That'll be around here somewhere. But check the links in the blurb below, and in those links you'll find opportunities to come and join me on those one-to-ones, on those webinars where we learn some incredible things. We also change the way in which we approach interview answers and things like that. We develop new ways of doing things. So it's really quite exciting running these webinars, because it's not just all about my ideas. I get a lot of ideas from you. You bring some incredible ideas. For example, how to answer forward-facing questions. I used to do it one way, and then one of my clients actually introduced, I'm thinking about what if we applied this method to, and it worked. And we did, and I adapted the approach, and it worked incredibly well. And several hundred people now have benefited from that change. So anyway, come and join these highly collaborative webinars. Check them out, check the links below. And remember, if you're in the recruitment process, I actually give you that guarantee that if you don't pass, I will give you a refund. How about that? Should I do that? Let me know in the comments. Should I do that for promotion candidates as well? I don't know. You let me know. All right. Anyway, listen, hope you enjoyed this. And please do press that subscribe button. I drop one of these probably 2 or 3 times a week. Hopefully continuing to serve you and be useful for you. And I'll catch up with you soon, folks. Bye-bye for now.